This all starts with an email from a hunter just like you, and then a phone call. This is Joe Giglia from ElkBros.
Hey, Joe, what a surprise.
Beagle's right behind me. He's screaming back.
I was probably 19, 20 before I first got in the woods.
What you're about to hear is an actual phone call from myself calling someone just like you to talk about your elk hunt and the stories that came with it.
And they were just going crazy on September 3rd.
Where I could cut down and get back into the timber, and I had the wind in my face, which was perfect.
I think I got chills.
And then we're like, well, now what do we do?
Real people on real hunts sharing their experiences, the highs, the lows, the laughs, the learning moments, and we even talk strategies and possible alternatives to help other folks as well. My name is Joe Giglia. Welcome everyone to a special audio experience of Blue Collar Elk Hunting's Elk Camp Conversations. Scott.
Hey, Joe.
How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Real good. I mean, how long has it been since you and I have talked?
Oh, man. A couple of years. I remember you video chatted for a little bit, and we had a good conversation. So good to hear from you again.
Yeah, you too, man. Hey, I got to tell you, I got to warn you up front. It's no big deal. I just want you to know that this is being recorded for our episode, the next episode of Elk Camp Conversations, if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Awesome, dude. Yeah, because the whole idea, I don't know if you've listened to any of these episodes, but the whole idea is these are folks that I have conversations with anyway. I mean, you send pictures in, you send emails in, I read those, and I want to give a call and say congrats, and next thing you know, we're talking about the thing that we love the most, and that's elk hunting. So
yeah, man, I love it, and I love keeping up with you guys and just paying attention to everything, and you guys are just such a wealth of knowledge. It's, because I tell all my buddies, I say, there's some mainstream guys out there that'll teach the basics and whatnot, but the ElkBros are teaching things that are above and beyond, and all the intangibles that are so important that go towards hunting and just in life in general. And you guys have such a great thing going with the bros.
That,
dude. It's like you guys bring in it's like you bring the audience with you on all of your trips, and it feels like you're just sitting next to you guys in a campfire ring and just shooting the breeze, And
appreciate that, because that is the whole idea of what we do. And I want to tell you now, I am proud to say, between my cousins, uncles, aunts, and grandparents, I think we're up to at least 11 listeners now. So, it's I gotta, Gil has a ton of family, so that helps out too. The only problem is they're the only ones listening. They're still giving bad reviews. I'm like, what's up with this, fam? Right? So
yeah.
So, dude, I had to give you a call. I've been watching you follow us over the years. We've had conversations in the past. You've taken some of the stuff that we've taught you in, and I see photos coming in. Photos were coming in from some of your earlier hunts, but there was something special, and I think I was just taking off to Canada. Me and the boys were heading out to Canada. We were on the road, and I get a message. I get a DM from you with some photos of what?
That was my deer hunt and possibly my elk hunt.
Yeah.
But they happened a week apart from each other.
Yeah. And actually it was, you were telling me your first archery elk.
Yeah. So it's kind of neat, because you go through the motions.
Uh-huh.
You go through all the blood, sweat, and tears, quite literally. And, year after year passes by, and I've been hunting since 2009, somewhere in there, 2009. And
so now let me ask you this though. So you say you've been hunting or hunting elk?
I've been both. So I've been hunting elk and deer, big games specifically. I did a little, and so I grew up in South Dakota.
Right.
My parents weren't weren't hunters at all. Do a little bit of fishing here and there, and then I ended up moving down to Arizona. And down there, it's just there's a lot of game down there, but you have to draw. And I was young and I didn't really know what the heck I was doing, so got into coyote a little bit. But once I moved up here to Wyoming, it's the name of the game up here. If you don't hunt, people kind of frown upon you. And so naturally I get into it, and I just developed a pretty good passion for it. And it became, you guys talk about, you got hunters, and then you got those guys that are just living the lifestyle, and it goes all year long, not just during the season. But I mean, anywhere from e-scouting to reloading to pulling the trigger is just part of it, but not the fun part, right? That's actually kind of the end of the season kind of part, and it's depressing.
I want to make sure that everybody hears this, because my wife used to accuse me of passing on animals, and I'll tell you, before I really got into heavy guiding, and if I had extended time to be out, and you had an animal walk in front of you in day one, man, let me tell you what, it was the hardest thing, because it's like, okay, this is the end of the season right here in front of me, and you just love being out there so much, right?
Yeah, it's it goes along with that passion,
and you're in the middle of it now, YO dude. So that's very, very cool. So you've been hunting elk since big game since 2009, right?
Yeah, and I learned from a couple of old timers. Always the best to learn from. And so I've told you stories about my old timer, Mike Bright. He's a former Marine.
Right.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. And even when he passed at 76 a couple years ago, he was still, just giving me all the advice he can and the experience to learn from him. And, that just goes a long way.
I think that's one of the reasons that we you and I actually got talking, because I remember getting that email. And I mean, you had listened to episodes and stuff about us talking about Carl, and you sent in that Mike had passed away and the impact that had on you. And, I mean, touched me, right in the heart. I mean, right where it all hits, man, because I get it. And, we've been there, done that, and it sucks. But, we talked about all the good things that you were taking from that, and how you got to now take him on hunts with you from then on out. So, what a cool guy he was in your life, right?
Yeah, it feels good to be the young guy in the group of two, to be the motivator. But then when you get up there, you think you're all that, and then he humbles you pretty quickly. And he couldn't hike as fast, which actually, you always talk about, like, you don't have to go deep, and you don't have to go 5-10 miles in with your backpack or anything. We would normally just do a base camp, but he would slow me down so much that we would just see more and more and more animals every single year. So we were just hiking slow, we're being quiet, and we went on his pace and not the young guy's pace, and that helped out a lot.
Right. Well, and I like to refer to that as a hunter's pace too, though, man, because you're moving, but so I always tell people the best time to draw on an elk is when they're moving, because everything's moving around them. They don't see as well. And the same thing is for us. I mean, when you're moving fast, and a lot of times guys are looking without looking. They almost get tunnel vision, looking at where their next foot is going to go down, because you're moving fast and you don't want to drop. And then you're checking ahead on trail, and so you're missing some stuff, and things are moving around you, so you don't catch some of that movement. And a lot of people might attribute that to a guy's pace or whatever, but a lot of savvy hunters move at that hunter pace in a way so that they're able to cover ground, but at the same time, they almost have a little bit of a stillness at times where they can catch things, see things, and notice what's out there and take more of it in.
Right. I mean, that, just going slow with Mike was always nice, because it builds on that camaraderie out there too, knowing that, like, hey, I'm hunting with my best friend. If we're successful, then great. But if not, then great. At least we get those experience of of being able to go as far as we can. And we always knew that the farther you go, the farther the pack out. So we had to balance that a little bit too.
Right.
So, and when I take out new hunters, I try to explain that too. It's like, hey, you have all the YouTube guys can explain everything in the entire Bible of hunting, but when it comes down to it, you just got to do whatever you can. Don't try to compete with all the other people. Hunt at your own pace, hunt at your own style, and eventually you'll learn over the years. And that's just kind of what I've been trying to build on. And I'm not a pro by any means. It's amazing that I've filled my tags pretty much every year, but it is Wyoming, and a lot of people make fun of me because we have such great populations, but you still have to get close to the animals in order to get them.
Yeah.
And they're very smart and savvy. And the reason why the populations are good here is because they are survivors. And so it's still a really good challenge, that's for sure.
So how many elk have you taken so far?
Oh man, I keep a tally at home, and it's at least one every year. I don't think I've missed a year yet, and some of them are cows.
Yeah, sure.
I think one year is 2011. I didn't fill an elk tag, but other years I've gotten multiple, because in Wyoming we're allowed to shoot only one bull but multiple cows.
And but this year was your first year of taking a bull with archery, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And that's, you start learning. I think I only started archery hunting 3 years ago. And I, they say mule deer are tougher, but I actually ended up shooting 2 mule deer first. Man, that's an emotion getter. You end up thinking, did I just do that? You have to start asking yourself, okay, well, I'm supposed to be out here elk hunting. Our elk and deer archery, they overlap. They both start September 1st. So
right.
You can go out with the mindset of like, okay, if anything comes in front of me, then it's going to have a bad day. Anything that's legal, and you were talking about passing up animals, but being a beginner, I just want that first or second one underneath my belt. And so before I even leave camp, I have to decide and know already, like, don't hesitate when the opportunity comes up. Be an opportunist and take that window of opportunity. And that window is very small, man. Let me tell you, like, that deer was sitting there, and I was actually elk hunting, and the first deer that I had, it was just a little tiny baby. He was still in velvet. And I said, you got 5 minutes, little boy. If you don't move, you're right in my way to those elk. The elk were only a couple hundred yards farther, but he was sitting right on a trail, and I didn't want to spook him and then spook everything out. And I was like, well, he'll be my first. And it was about a 50 or 55 yard shot. And I ended up getting them. And I was still happy,
Absolutely, man.
Pass up a good opportunity. So,
well, so the cool thing about that is we've got you on here, and there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about, because in that transition period, I mean, you had a lot of success. I guess before it was rifle, muzzleloader. What was it that you were hunting with before, or both of those?
So I've been trying to, over the years, you get so many opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I started out with a 270. My first elk was down in the Grays River of Wyoming. Everybody knows about it. It's not a secret. It's really hard to draw, but the genetics down there are just unmatched.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up shooting my first elk in 2010, and it was with my 270, and my girlfriend at the time was with me, and her father was standing right above me, my feet in the river. I was laying prone, and he said, shoot. So the stress level was extremely high, and it was a 515 yard shot.
Wow.
And
that's a poke.
It's a poke. Yeah, it was, and I got him, and, it was a good experience. And then, from there, started getting some solo. And then I met Mike, and then Mike and I ended up shooting some every year. But it was the same thing over and over, And so I started dabbling around with a rifled slug. So in Wyoming,
mm-hmm.
in Jackson Hole, there's the National Elk Refuge.
Right.
And I, late season, you can go out there and you can go into the southern unit and you can use a slug gun or any short range weapon. It's a short range weapon only. And so I took advantage of that, and I ended up using that slug gun, and I got an elk that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and so I started thinking, I'm like, well, how many different types of weapons can I harvest animals with?
Right.
And so I built on that. I'm like, all right, well, if I go back up into some of my honey holes and I go in real close, can I get an animal with my 357 Magnum? And I looked in the Wyoming regulations, and they say that that particular caliber, straight walled, is the smallest legal caliber allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And ended up doing a cow party and had a bull sneak in. I was up on a ridge line and had a bull sneak in behind me, and I ended up getting that bull with my 357. It was a Smith & Wesson 686.
Wow.
And so I'm like, well, now I got to take on archery, because that's one of the few things that I haven't done yet. So ended up getting into archery, and along with that is everything that you guys teach, man. I mean, it's like the calling, the getting close.
Well, you had to do that with that 357, brother. I mean, that's an archery weapon, really.
Yeah. And, that was so fun. I tell people, like, you got to go out and try that. Get a slug gun or a 30-30 or something and go bushwhacking in the north faces.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that is exhilarating. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and the only thing is, and it would probably most likely happen if somebody went to pistol, but man, you got to get behind that weapon to really work on your accuracy.
Yeah,
that's
I bought a new rifle, and the way I did that is you shoot a couple of times when you're breaking a new rifle in,
mm-hmm.
or just out plinking and making sure it's dialed, and your barrel heats up, so you take a break, and in between those breaks, I would shoot my pistol, and I'd set a target out there at 200 yards, and I just use my plinking rounds so that and I reload, so I just load up a bunch of 38 special and I'd plink, and I'd know, like, okay, I'm gonna aim a couple of feet high, and I miss low, and so aim higher, and pretty soon you start feeling it out, and you're like, man, I can consistently hit these things at 100, 150 yards out,
right,
and that's plenty for within 100 yards, and that round still has enough energy to double lung an elk.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying, and that's proof of what you do, man. I don't care what weapon you use. I don't care what it is. If you get behind it and you know it and you become intimate with it and you know its capabilities in combination with your own, that's what it takes to ensure that you can get it done and get it done quickly and responsibly, like you said out there. So very cool, man.
Your topic of ethics comes on top of that too. And I've always made sure that I'm an ethical hunter. Knowing that being a reloader, I know that my bullet will expand a certain amount out to a certain distance with a specific velocity, depending on the bullet manufacturer. So right. I just go off those numbers. I know there's a lot of arguments out there, and I don't want to get into that, but I just stay within those parameters, and you're golden. And so I try to pick my weapons for whatever type of hunter style of hunt that I'm doing, and with archery, it seems, you start arguing like, oh, what broadhead is the best? You put that out on social media, and you'll get every single manufacturer that has killed elk. So basically, it doesn't matter. Just shoot whatever you shoot best.
Whatever you shoot best, that is going to get the job done and is going to give you two holes, man. That's,
Yeah.
And, I got, we always have this conversation about mechanicals. And, there's some people that say, well, I've killed elk with mechanicals. And I'm sure people do that, man. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not saying they can't. But it's kind of like the same thing that I teach about, shooting in the golden triangle or taking a frontal. I mean, a frontal is one of the most deadly shots there is. But it also has a huge margin of error for somebody that isn't used to being in that situation or understand the anatomy, or hasn't, for example, you've heard Gilbert talked about the first time. I can tell you, man, before this bull steps in front of Gilbert, before this happens on this one hunt, we're down there shooting, and he's telling me, man, I put down hundreds of white-tailed deer. You just get one of them boogers in front of me and he's toast, and a bull steps out in front of him, and everything he knew about bow hunting, when that bull screamed in his face, went out the crack of his rear end, dude. Now, if you're somebody that yourself, that situation, you can do that. But again, for me, I'm not coaching to just a mortal hit and a hit that I know is going to kill. Like the golden triangle is absolutely going to kill an animal. What I'm coaching towards is to ensure the easiest recovery, and a lot of times the quickest recovery. And that's why I tell people to go up that now, talking if we're completely broadside, you got to make adjustments for quartering, but completely broadside, we're going up the back of that leg, mid body, 3 inches back, and punching both lungs, and that animal will be down in 20 seconds. Because we have 2 holes, we have more blood, and it really helps us in tremendous amount in our recovery of that animal. Most of the time, you see them drop, right? So, whereas if I pop in that golden triangle, I actually had a guy that hearted a bull, and we found that bull. It took us a while, but because it went in one side, ends up popping and hitting the bone on the other side, not getting 2 holes. The arrow gets sheared when the animal moves the leg. It shears that, so now you have loose, and so now it's bleeding internally. We didn't get the blood trail we wanted. The animal goes 600 yards, and in a lot of cases, if you end up in the wrong situation with a lot of grass, that's high grass, that's difficult to find any kind of track or any kind of blood because of the way things move around there, or if you have bad weather come in or anything like that, man, I mean, it makes it near impossible sometimes to find them, right? So
I think you just described my elk hunt last year to the T.
Really?
Yeah, and you've mentioned this before, where you're talking about the golden triangle, but sometimes it's hard to determine, are they actually broadside?
Right.
They may look at it because they're a large animal, but you were saying the best thing to do is just look at their legs. If you can see all 4 legs, they're turned one way or the other.
Absolutely.
And then, then the second thing, you look at their shadow and which way is it cast, and then you can determine, are they quartering away, are they quartering to, and then kind of a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like, where should I aim? And
if that animal is facing to the left, and that back leg on the opposite side is in front of this leg on this side, he's quartering too. I mean, same thing with the front leg. If he's facing to the left-hand side and that off front leg is in front of, at that angle where you're seeing a space between those legs, he's quartering too. Yeah. If you're seeing that front leg is back behind, the onside leg on the front, he's quartering away. So, I mean, just by reading the placement of that leg, and I'll tell you this, I've seen it so an animal is broadside on the rear end and quartering on the front side. Do you know what I mean? They've kind of turned their body just a little bit because they're a long animal. And so even though one part of the body is almost flat, broadside to you, they can actually start quartering towards or away on the front end of there. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you though, man.
No worries. Yeah, I was just, saying, like you're explaining that, I'm just getting flashbacks from a good day.
Yeah. So let's first of all, man, there's so many things I want to ask you, because being somebody that has had that experience with different firearms and then gone to archery, there is so much to bring to that, because there's so many people in that situation as you that are making that move, or even some people like myself. I think 2 years ago I hunted my first, I've been hunting elk, this is my 42nd season. 2 years ago was my first time ever shooting an elk with a rifle. Even though I've guided all these guys, it was my first time actually myself using a rifle. So the thing that I had an advantage is I've guided guys with rifle for so many years. So it wasn't a huge adjustment, right? As far as, the strategy on finding and getting up and everything like that. But for
Well,
go ahead.
I know there's a lot of people that may pride themselves on archery and like, oh, I can get close and all that. But if you're an opportunistic and you don't get your chances early season, there's times in Wyoming when your archery season is going to end. Say for elk, for example, there's the elk is all of September. At the end of September, hunting shuts down for 2 weeks for elk in most general areas, because it'll come back up on October 15th. Now you have other general areas that might start like September 15th, so September 26th.
Okay.
And so they overlap and everything. But if you don't have that opportunity, you're like, oh well, I'm done hunting. No way, buddy. I mean, you still have another month and a half or 2 months left of hunting, but it's with rifles. So
right. That's the
tell
cool
everybody,
part,
like,
right?
Yeah, and just tell people, like, don't pride yourself too much on being able to shoot, with whatever weapon you have, and you're the best here or whatever. Just learn them all and be proficient and feel comfortable, and then when you get out in the field, you don't even have to think about it. You just go and you do it and have fun, and hopefully you fill every tag every year.
Well, that's something you guys have that is special, and they do that up in Canada too, because Chavez up in Alberta, once they're done with archery, that's why those guys, they don't worry too much, during the archery season. They really don't push it, and they really try not to push animals out of areas, because if it doesn't happen in archery, it's going to happen in rifle for them. But there aren't many states that are like that. You pick, choose, and that's it, right? And like you take the season in Colorado archery season is basically 30 days. And here in New Mexico, if you take the first hunt, that's, 14 days. If you take the second hunt, that's 10 days. And you got to get it done. And for somebody like myself who guides, generally I had 5 days on the front end of the hunt. And I either got it done or I didn't, because I was going to have to then guide the rest of the season. So it even gets more limiting, man, from there. So that's very cool what you guys can do up in Wyo.
Yeah, and in fact, I've been so fortunate that I've never hunted outside of Wyoming. I've helped other people hunt, but as a non-resident, I've never had to hunt any other state before. And I know prices now.
Why would you? I mean, you've got the Mecca, man.
It's kind of cheating. So, we need more people, I guess, in Wyoming, but
no.
Nobody wants to live here. It's a boring state, really, and it's cold and windy.
Oh, yeah, I hear you, dude.
You got to be tough.
Yeah. No, it's if it wasn't for their system, like, I'm not a points guy. I won't, I think if I was ever to do any kind of points, it would be in Colorado, because I think with what's getting ready to happen, I think you'll still be able to get a draw with 1, 2, 3 points, but I'll never go beyond that. I'm not one of these wait 20 years of putting all this money in all these places to get these points just to watch all that creep happen there. And then, I would rather try to hunt. If I was in a situation where I wasn't in an elk stake, I would try to make sure that I'm hunting, if not every year, every other year, and 3 at the most, man. But I'd have a hard time with that, right? So,
the point system is unfortunate, because once a state starts it, they can't really back out. I guess they could, but you're going to make a lot of people mad because they've spent so many thousands of dollars, and it's been 20 years and they still haven't drawn for their animal, and I'm such a new and young hunter that I've decided that I'm probably never going to be able to hunt moose or bighorn sheep or whatever. And I wouldn't say that I'm strictly a meat hunter, because I like a good trophy when the opportunity comes around. But I don't really need the big antlers and all that. So in Wyoming, we could just get the general tag too. So that's another so-called secret of the Wyoming system, is you get the general tag, and there's an abundance of opportunities in many different units, and you're not restricted to just one single drawn unit. So
right. Yeah, now they've got the region thing going on, but it's still a bunch of units in each region, so that kind of works out, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't know anything about other states. I used to live in Arizona, and I think the Arizona and Colorado are some of the fewer states that still offer an over-the-counter archery tag.
Do they really in Arizona for elk? I don't think
I think
so.
so, but they stick you in a unit with like 2 elk.
Oh, okay. Okay, I
And you
got
got
you.
there's not very many of them, and it's really hard to get one. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I was thinking back to our conversation, we were talking about the whole passing thing, earlier. And that was one benefit though when I quit hunting solo and I started hunting with Chav and other people is that now I could go ahead and put one on the ground right away and and it's like I got to help everybody else now. So that made it a lot more fun. You know what I mean?
yeah, man, you can be the meat producer for camp, right? You
Yeah,
have
yeah.
good steaks for the rest of the hunt.
Yeah, yeah, get that pressure off, get one on the ground. So here's what I wanted to ask you, Scott, man. So all those years of experience with the firearm, going to archery, what were the biggest ahas or the biggest problem areas or moments or things that you found you had to get a grasp on for that change?
Well, the obvious one is getting in close, right? You
Right.
later season, you have a rifle, they're harder to find. And honestly, the reason why I got in archery,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, is because it was my first year I drew for antelope. That is one thing that us residents have to draw for is antelope in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to hunt more, man. I knew that the archery season for antelope started August 15th, so it got me out there sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did, and I got out there. And I mean, you're a dummy if you think you're gonna do your very first archery hunt on an antelope.
Right.
So it was a lot of exercise, and I was unsuccessful, but I was still out there getting in shape for deer season. And but trying to get close on an antelope was really tough. I pulled it off a couple of times, got up to 40, 50 yards, and never did get a shot because they're so keen. But
Have you tried that with the decoy yet?
no, it's all been spot and stock, and
Well, it's still spot and stock, but man, you put one of them ultimate predator decoys on the front of your bow, and it changes the game a little bit.
that would be really nice. I've never done that before. What I did do is I highlighted the shape of a silhouette of a big cow.
Yeah, I've seen people do that. Yeah.
And there, where I'm hunting, is there's some private land in and out of there, and there's a rancher that runs his cows up there, and I carrying around this big old cow silhouette. It kind of helped a little bit, but I ended up being a little more successful if I'm just out in the open. Using the sagebrush in the terrain, it was a challenge, but it was an accepted challenge.
Mm-hmm. No, very cool,
Pretty
man.
fun.
So let me get you back to that question, man. Besides, all right, so now you got to get close. All right, so I attribute that to good hunting skill sets anyway. Like, when I came from being a backwoods bow hunter for deer, mule deer and stuff like that, the whole stalking game of trying to get close, but now that you got that aspect coming in on elk, what else was it for you that were the things that you think about now that you had to change, or the biggest aha moments or things that you had to learn?
Definitely playing the wind.
Mm.
You'll hear everybody, especially the pros like yourself, always talking about the wind. If you don't get the wind right, there's no chance. It doesn't matter how many wind blockers and sprays and different things and clothing and gear that you're going to find.
Right.
The animal's nose will never be beaten. So with the rifle, depending on the type of rifle you have, you can take some pretty good long shots, but again, with the ethics thing, I always try to get within a good hunting range. Anything within 300 or 400 yards is good. And out here in Wyoming, everything is so spread out that
Right. Long shots. Yeah.
You get pretty long shots, and you could be shooting across a canyon or whatever. And when you when you think about it, you have your archery. It's like, well, now all of a sudden the game changes a little bit, and you're going to be seen or heard or smelt as you're approaching. And so that aha was like, you start feeling like a serious hunter. You're not just walking around with a rifle and you can shoot something at a long distance. You're actually having to hunt.
So did you
And
find yourself wanting to change the type of terrain that you were hunting rifle hunts?
well, it's kind of a hybrid approach.
Okay.
So some of the areas that I'm hunting will be thick or dense. Other areas will be really wide. So you get up in the morning and at dusk, and you're using your binos and your glass, and you can spot them, and you can locate them and go in the next day or whatever. With archery, it could be like that. You spot them, and then you come up with your plan. And then all of a sudden it becomes real. You're like, okay, now I have a plan, but now you just have to start thinking like, which way is the wind going? You can't just run up to the edge of the cliff and shoot across the canyon and you'd be done.
Right.
You have to climb down the canyon. Do you want to go high above them, or do you want to go low and approach from below? Like in the mornings, all your wind is coming, your cold wind is coming downhill because heat rises, cold sinks. Opposite in the evenings. Midday is always nice because most of the wind is just going uphill really quickly. There could be some really windy days, which it's a double-edged sword because you have the wind that's masking your sound.
Right.
It's a consistent wind to help your scent go in a single direction. But when you get in close enough, if it's too windy, that could really affect an archery shot.
Yeah, unless you're 20, 30 yards, right? So yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I think it's kind of cool because the point that you bring up about the weather conditions, I always hear people bring up weather conditions as the negative, and I think every weather condition has a positive, in the right situation. Like you said, that hard wind, man, is prime time moving in on an animal, man, once you have one spotted, right? So
in fact, I think I've shot most of my animals in weather, all types of different weather, but very rarely is it a nice sunny day with no wind. It's always some type of weather that generally, it helps out more than it doesn't.
One of my favorites, man, thick fog, cold morning, dense brush, is so awesome, man. I mean, you're almost. Yeah, we were in a position a couple years ago, and we had actually got snowed on in September. I know you guys are used to that in New Mexico. That's like a blue moon, right? To get, really snowed on. We've had hail and we've had different things like that, but to get 4 to 6 inches of snow on you in September is incredibly rare here. And this happens to us, man. And, you get, because of that temperature change and it trying to warm up, you end up with this thick fog, snow on the ground. We're moving in, bulls screaming all around us, and you're seeing from like anywhere from 60 maybe to 100 yards out, and it looks like these ghosts just moving,
Cool.
Oh, it is one of my most memorable moments. It's so dreamlike that you almost get caught just watching. You know what I mean? It's just so cool.
So with the fog, so I have a background in audio engineering, and with the fog, you got to be careful because it's one of the, because of the density, it carries sound farther.
Oh, very
than
interesting.
there's no fog. So if you're in the fog, your footsteps, your clothes brushing, everything, your sound is going to carry a lot farther than it would without it.
Well,
now, if you have,
we had snow on the ground, damp snow was kind of melted, so that really helped. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just leading to that. Is if you're in like thicker vegetation or like in a thick north face in the trees, and you just get a good dumping of snow. I don't know if you've ever been in like, well, I'm sure you have, but a lot of people haven't. And you be in this newly thick snow in the morning and you're talking and it just sounds so quiet and peaceful.
Oh, yeah.
If you try
like
bugling, Yeah, I mean, if you try bugling like that, it's going to change. It's going to change a lot of different things. I mean, it's still the game, so I wouldn't change anything as far as strategy, but you just got to keep that in the back of your head.
So that this year, and it was the first time. I mean, I never think about stuff like this because a lot of times I wouldn't have conversations, but as our groups have gotten bigger and we're doing coaching stuff, we have a lot of conversations about things that happen in the hunts. And this year, I mean, there was one day we went out and you could be on the opposite side, a half mile away, give out a little location or cow call, and you could hear a bull bugle or respond. I mean, from 3/4 to a mile away, easy in the morning.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
I think it was the following day or 2 days later, you go out there and it was like dead silent, but they were bugling. You just couldn't hear them. And we started, I think it was because we had a high pressure system that came in that was just knocking, it didn't let the sound go, so have you ever dealt with that in your acoustics?
I have, on hot days, it seems like the heat waves will slow down sound.
Oh,
Not necessarily
interesting.
slow it down, but it'll block it
Mm-hmm.
more. So on a hot day where your thermals are coming uphill,
Mm-hmm.
say if you're down below or across a canyon, um, it's amazing how that sound will work. It's like you've been around a campfire and you're trying to talk to somebody going through the fire, and their voice sounds a little wishy-washy.
Oh yeah, yeah. It kind of pushes out. Well, everything as soon
Staying
as the
constant.
sun comes up and birds start chirping, breeze starts going, thermals start changing, especially in density of trees, man, sound just doesn't carry, right? So
Yeah.
totally different than
or
early
or
in the
it's
morning.
masked. There's a thing called masking. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have a specific volume, it could be masked over time and distance,
Okay.
and that could play a big factor. When it starts getting windier and when the sun starts coming up, the wind will pick up, and then you have a lot of different sounds between the river flowing, the sound of the wind going, and all the animals. Um, those bugles, especially if they're turned away from you,
Mm-hmm.
they may not
Absolutely.
they may not echo against the trees as
Mm-hmm.
well, or whatever factors are out there in nature. It's going to play a big difference,
Well,
despite being the exact same.
as soon as that critter, like when you hear those bulls that are bugling down in the middle of a park, and that sound is just echoing, and what happens is the further away from that you are, the more melodic it becomes, almost like eerie, I guess is the word to say to it. The
Hmm.
closer you are to an elk's voice, the more you can hear the nuances to the voice. Even like when they're super close, you can almost like hear the air rather than the sound. It's interesting on that, but um,
Yeah.
and it almost sounds like they're farther away. A lot of times you're like, oh man, it's far, but it's just that they're right on top of you. But as soon as they hit the trees, man, and they start getting those trees and they get in that density, it starts killing that sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you're exactly right. There's a lot of people that they're trying to move in on a bull and they hear that sound so far away, and it's just that that bull is bugling away in a different direction. And and I'm only saying this because it's not, I'm saying this because this happened to a friend. It's not like I would make a mistake like this, but you start barreling in on them because you're trying to cut the distance, and boom, they're just
Yeah.
right there, right? So,
Yeah, it could be deceiving.
oh
You got
yeah.
to make sure you're communicating and with your caller too. Your team of guys. You start thinking one thing. Oh, we got to go faster. We got to go harder. And all of a sudden they're right there on top of you, and you're like, where did this guy come from?
Dude, I'm always, I mean, I got to come out with it, man. I'm always the one blowing things up. Always. I'm so aggressive, man, when I'm out there, especially on public land. And it's especially early in my career, it's such a dance to know when to hurry up and slow down. When
Yeah.
you're out there doing that, it is such a dance, man. And and for me, and like I told guys, you know, when I would blow one up, I don't get upset. It's kind of like getting blocked in basketball. I, I mean, it just comes with the game.
Go right after it again.
Yeah, you just get right back after it and you create that next opportunity, because I really think that my aggressiveness, and I'll say aggressiveness both in how I move, the pressure I put sometimes, and also on my calling. And I always have to explain that when I talk and say I'm aggressive in my calling, it's not aggressive sounds I'm using, it's that I am using sounds, whether they're cow sounds or whether they're low vocalizations, but I use my voice. I use elk language to create opportunities, so I'm very aggressive in that part of it, right? But I really think I've created way more opportunities because of it, even though some of those get blown like that.
Well, I mentioned to you yesterday, I went back into your previous episodes, episodes 108 and 109,
Mm-hmm.
and you're talking about calling and painting that picture. And it teaches you that if something blows up or something doesn't go your way, elk are, unless they smell you or they see you or whatever, but if they don't, you can get them to turn back around because they're very social animals. If they bark, you're talking about how if a cow barks at you, you're pretty much done, but not all the time. If they bark, then you just bark right back at them and
Absolutely.
do a little chuckle or whatever. And, you have to understand there's so many factors, you have to understand the animal's body language and their language.
Well, if they're barking at you,
at what time.
I mean, if that critter has seen you, heard you, smelt you, and knows that you are you, they're not going to bark, man. They're getting out of Dodge. When they bark,
Right.
they're just telling you, show yourself because I'm not sure, right? So there's still
And
a
they're waiting
workaround.
for an answer.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're waiting for an answer. They're saying, hey, and it's like a human talking. You're going to say like, hey, who are you over there? And
Show
they're
yourself.
just saying, hey,
yep.
Yeah, what are you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I tell them, I'm like, no, you show yourself, right? So there's workarounds to that, because if they're barking, most of the time they've seen movement, right? And
Right.
they're trying to figure out, okay, well, is that another elk over there? So they haven't smelled you, they haven't truly identified you. They might have heard something, but they haven't identified that. So you still have opportunity there with that. But good
Right.
point on that. So let's do this, dude. Let's talk about your first archery bull, man. I want to hear the story on this.
So how do you start that story? So I have my 2 deer from previous years, and I've attempted to do archery elk, but it never works out the way you want. So I know an area pretty well. I know where some of the wallows are and some trails and how the land is laid out. You have a couple of different finger ridges that are parallel to each other, and some of them are deeper draws. They could drop down 1,000, maybe 1,500 foot in elevation, and some water going in there. But it's been dry a lot lately. But last year we had significant snowfall.
Yeah, y'all got pounded. Yeah,
we got hit really hard, and I know everybody's heard about our antelope and deer populations. So
right.
along with that, though, came a lot of spring rain and pretty consistent precipitation throughout the summer. So I with that in mind, I tried to change up my strategy a little bit, and I did a lot of scouting, got boots on the ground, get out there and find where some of the wallows are, or where even like old logging roads might have had some dips in them that'll pool up. And I ended up finding one of those areas. And funny thing is, like, the I think it was the weekend before that, I had been up scouting for deer, and I walked up a ridge, and it just kept on climbing and climbing, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of deer sign in here. And there was the top part where there are 2 or 3 of these finger ridges all met together, and it creates this little basin parkway, and you could see a lot of rubs in there, a lot of sign, some water trickling down. I was like, man, this is prime. And I saw one of the two shooter bucks, and I ended up getting one of those bucks after it was at September 16th I got it. But I knew of that area, and so we kept on going a little bit farther. And I mean, we're talking only a couple 100 yards. It's not like miles.
Right.
And I go over into the north face of this area. Well, it turns out that these elk have been using a pool of water. I wouldn't even call it wallow, but they turned it into a wallow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an old log road, and so the day before, it was opening day, and I was up solo, and it was just downpouring, nasty snow in the morning that turned to rain, and it had rained all day long. I didn't see anything. I was over on a different ridge line, and I think that's when I sent you that text. I said, "Hey, Joe, I see this deer, but I don't see it again. Do you think it's on a different ridge line or whatever?" And that next day I ended up, I got up there dark and early. The rain had stopped, and so everything was just wet though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had to use our waders to go up through hip tall weeds from all the precipitation. They were pretty high, a lot of weed growth,
Right.
which was nice because it was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to get over, I'd say about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. We got up on top of that ridge line and started hearing some kicking around in a wallow. And I didn't see the bull at all, but I wanted to get over there to him, and I knew the wind was going downhill, get over to that north face, and it's going to be going right down to him. So got in there about 200 yards, maybe 180 yards. And I'm still about 200 or 300 feet in elevation above this guy, because there's a nice sharp slope, a north face going down through pines. And so I couldn't see him. I could just hear him splashing around down there. So I'm like, all right, everything's going downhill. So the draw is going downhill from my left to right. And I knew the wind was going to be turning a little bit going down to my right. So I go over about 100 or 200 yards to my right up on the top of the ridge. And I dropped down, and I didn't get more than maybe 50 yards down there. And I busted two cows. I didn't realize there were cows over there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another one of those aha moments, like, well, of course he has cows. He's a bull splashing around in a wallow.
And what's the time of year here?
This is September 2nd.
September 2nd. So
yeah.
you had a bull with cows, and generally at that time it's going to be a younger bull, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said earlier, I left camp in my mind knowing that if I have a legal animal,
oh, absolutely. Dude, no, hey, so it's just good for people to understand kind of like the concepts of what's going on with a lot of this, man, that, these older guys, it's not their first rodeo, and everything elk do, everything they do is for preservation of energy, which means, being able to store fat, keep fat, not burn things off, to keep weight on their body so that they're ready for winter and can survive that. So they are masters at trying to do things in a way that they can survive what's getting ready to happen with the weather. So these older bulls are going to set off and let these younger guys go out there and pull these cows in early season. Once they get
right, they're kind of like the ranch wranglers, right?
Absolutely, man. Yeah. You boys, y'all go on ahead. It's kind of like your buddy Mike, man. He's like, yeah, go out there, Scott, round them up for me, man. I'll be there in a minute.
Exactly what he did too. He said, "You go do some of the hard work and let me know where they're at." So I can go and pull the trigger.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Ain't his first rodeo, bro. So yeah. So you're going down and you spot some cows, right? Cool.
I didn't spot them actually. They smelt me.
They busted
I was
you.
going down there, and I probably was maybe 50 yards from them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 50 yards off the top of the ridge. I'm 50 yards from these elk, and I knew my scent was going down there right when I heard them bust. I'm like, your first instinct is like, oh crap, now what? And then they start running the only trail that goes through there, and it's a pretty nice heavy trail. It's been used quite a bit. And it's not, you talk about like you leave a trailhead and there's a horse trail 2 foot wide that goes up the main canyon.
Uh-huh.
It was like that going in and out
Oh,
of there,
man.
full of elk track.
Yeah.
And
Highway.
highway time, yeah, with multiple springs and wallows and a lot of it looks like they were doing some clear cutting through there, so you
Uh-huh.
get these jack pines that are maybe 15 or 20 footers everywhere. And I mean, I don't know how long ago that must have been, 15 or 20 years ago, I bet. And so anyway, these cows go down onto that highway right below them, and they run right past the bull in the wallow. And so now they're going uphill away from me, and they take that bull with them.
Mm-hmm.
Not, and so you're a little bit heartbroken. You're like, crap. That's probably my only opportunity for the morning. Or if there's some here, maybe there's still some left, or if they all got spooked out, I don't know. And so my buddy Joey and I were hunting together, so I was not solo at this time. And my buddy Joey, he's hunted and shot some whitetail back home in Tennessee, but he's never gone elk hunting before. So this is my first time bringing on a new hunter and trying to show him what I know. And here we're out there just busting elk.
Right.
But it was a good learning experience. Yeah, you get down there and you start snooping around the wallow and inspecting and trying to figure out, like, okay, what was happening here before we even came into their vicinity. And obviously I was hearing them splashing around, and I don't know if there were other cows. I just know that those two spooked out and took him with. So the only thing I know is there was 3 bulls, or two cows and 1 bull, 3 elk total. And it was a nice wallow, though. It was a good size, maybe 10 or 15 foot wide, real shallow, maybe an inch or 2 deep, and real muddy in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was open, but it was still, you had about 20 or 30 yards on every side of this wallow. And before there was a tree line. So we're sitting there like, okay, what should we do? We walk it over in all directions and try to see which way are the tracks going, and try to figure out, where should we set up, and should we just hang out here for a little bit and do a couple of calls, or try to locate them and see where these sounds are coming from. So we go uphill. So we're back into the north face. We're uphill from the wallow, tucked up into the shade, and we put our packs down and we get our calls out, and we're starting to get comfortable. And I'm like, well, let's just sit here and maybe start cow calling a little bit. I don't want to do any bull calls. I was just listening to your previous podcast. You always start out with your cow calls,
Mm-hmm.
because you can always introduce a bull later on. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you're a sweet talker, they may end up coming back, especially the first part of September. And so I sit down there and I start cow calling a little bit, couple of chirps here and mews here, and nothing too major, just sound like maybe 1 or 2 cows hanging out there. Maybe one. I was trying to paint that picture, like, do I want to be just 1 or 2 left behind, or do I want to be a lost cow
Mm-hmm.
in that situation?
What'd you go
And
with?
that's where you might want to chime in. Like, I don't know. And so I just went with 1 single cow,
Mm-hmm.
and tried to act like a lost cow, thinking, oh, they left me, but I'm lost. Where in the heck did you guys go? Start doing little tiny lost cows.
So here's the benefit in that, right? And you could even do it with a lost calf, right? But the benefit in that is you can pull both bulls or cows to you when you're doing that lost sound. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're pulling a cow, you're liable to be pulling a bull. And, if you have a bull out there that's searching, that he's, it's that time of year when they're out there and they're starting to cruise, starting to gather, right?
Yeah.
Now you're low-hanging fruit for a bull, especially, you're in Wyo where you've got more competition, but I've seen so many immature bulls with in Colorado with just 1 or 2 cows, and man, they get that 1 cow, they're like happy as can be. And so they just want to get that one cow, man. So you're liable to bring those in. You're not, and I mean, you can even, a lot of times you'll even pull some spikes in with something like that too, because they just want to be, especially if a spike here is like any kind of herd type thing going on, they want to be part of that and get back with them. But when you're doing that lost cow, that lost calf, you are broadcasting something that can be effective on both sides. So it's a plus. Whereas if you're just a cow that's got some mews going on as you're going in there, or some chirps as you're going, yeah, you're kind of representing a one or two cows that are going through there. It has its effectiveness too, but you are demanding when you're using that lost cow. Come to me. Hey, where are you? Where are you? So it has a little bit different effect. And to me, it's not the same old rodeo, right? So no, rock on, man. Keep going.
Yeah. And along with that is you were talking about how your odds increase when it becomes a dynamic game, meaning that as you're making these calls and you're painting your picture, you set that tone. So say you introduce a herd bull. Well, that's your plan. You're a herd bull and that's it. But if you go with a cow or a little calf or whatever, now you have some opportunity to change up your game dynamically in the middle of that sequence.
Yeah, so I'm a basketball coach, and I never started a game with a full court press, because that means I've done my best defense to be able to cause as many turnovers as possible. And in other words, I've given my best part of my game, and if they can beat that, I don't have any other thing I can do to change the game there. And it's the same way with what a lot of people do with when they introduce that aggressive bull. That's your game at that point. You know what I mean?
It's a chess match, right?
Yeah, that is the game. And so unless there's another bull that wants to play, that really wants to either challenge or get involved with that, you're pushing them away. So I never want to give my top escalation in anything. I always want to have the ability to change it dynamically, like what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Start out soft and slow, and
absolutely, man.
Build the momentum and go from there.
And hopefully they come into the play so that they introduce it. Or what happens so many times in this early season, man, is they're just going to sneak in silently to be able to check out what's going on, right? So
that has happened to me so many times. I'd be sitting out there, and I'd be sitting on a cliff or on a finger ridge, and you think they're going to be coming up the bottom. Well, guess what? They got the same idea you do. Stay high so they have the visibility and play the wind, and they come sneaking in right up behind you, and they could be standing there staring at you for who knows how long until you turn around and realize, like, oh, there's one right there.
Absolutely. Or you get bored and you're like, oh man, I've already done this for 10 minutes and I haven't heard anything. You get up, take a step, and there's a bull looking at you at 30 yards, right? So yeah, absolutely.
A lot of guys will get a little impatient. You get guys like Corey Jacobson. He's been doing it for ages, where he wants to be moving at all times, and he'll move 20 miles in a day.
Right.
When you get some guys that are like, oh, I'm sitting here for 5 minutes and I don't hear anything, and all of a sudden they get up and they start zipping their backpack and all this, and all the while there's a bull coming in 100 yards away, and he's coming in silent, and you'll never know, because you get up and you start making noise, and then he spooked off. And
and you have two different scenarios. You got Corey, which is actually trying to work a bull that's already escalating or is going to escalate pretty quick, right? Try to locate and then try to push those buttons on there. Whereas you got somebody else that is doing, starting out with the cow calls and then maybe introducing some other sounds or making sound like a little bit of herd. Totally different type of animal that's going to come into that, especially early season. So you got two dynamics going on with what Corey's doing. Corey's looking for that one animal that wants to play. Totally. And that's why he's got to cover the ground that he does. He wants that 1 in 20 bulls is what he wants. And I'm wanting all 20 bulls, because I'm not going to go in. My situation is that I'm not in the same dynamic where I can drive 20 miles. My game unit is my game unit, and it might be 22,000 acres, 40,000 acres, but that's it. That's all I get to work with because
Sure.
that's what I've drawn. So I have to figure out a way to work within that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and with that transition from rifle to archery, it makes me set my mind in a different tone of thought where, like I said, I leave camp knowing like I don't care what kind of bull it is, it's just a legal bull. So with that, I'm going to try my hardest in whatever situation to bring that animal into me or back to me again. So as we were sitting there, throw out a couple of calls, and we didn't have time to dig into our lunch. It wasn't even lunchtime yet. It was only like 8 or 9, but we were already hungry. We're like, oh, let's just sit down and have a little snack and see what happens.
Yep.
And I didn't even take a bite. And Joey's sitting on my left next to me, and he looks over. He's like, hey, Scott, here comes a big deer. I'm like, what the heck, a deer?
So, Scott,
And this is an area.
where is y'all's bow right now when you're sitting down eating?
I had it sitting on my lap ready to go.
There, yes, sir. Hopefully you
bet.
learned that from us, man.
because it's happened to me so many times. I'll be, out there going number 2, and I don't have my rifle, and here comes something sneaking up, and I'm like, oh man. Or something, you'd be sitting there, my buddy Mike, we'd be way up at 10,000 foot, and he's snoring, taking a nap, and I see an animal, and I shoot, and I scare the crap out of him, and like, man, you missed it all. You were out there daydreaming.
So he sees a big deer coming. He says, buddy, I see a big deer, right?
He says, here comes a big deer. And, through these little pines, just right above them, I can see this nice rat coming. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a deer. And of course it's deer archery season too. So I'm like, anything that comes up, I'm taking it. And so I get ready, and all of a sudden you realize that's not a deer, that's a small raghorn elk. But in my mind, I didn't have to worry because I was prepared to shoot no matter what, because I saw antlers. And I knew it wasn't a moose. So, and on top of that, being prepared, I had a mouth reed in my mouth.
Attaboy.
As well. And because I know Joey's not a skilled caller. And we're not using hoochie mamas. We will use hoochie mama and some primos and mix it up with a bunch of different calls to do our cow parties. Yeah. But when we're trying to be a little more honed in on our tones, we go with the mouth reed. So I'm, we're about 20 yards, maybe 25 yards uphill from this wallow. And for some reason, I don't know what this bull was thinking, but he ended up coming through the trees, but he goes off of the trail downhill from us. So on the other side, the downhill side of the wallow.
Okay.
And he ends up at 45 yards from us. And when he comes out behind that last little tree, I threw out a little cow call, and I stop him dead in his tracks. And immediately, as soon as he stopped, I let her rip. And you're talking about the quartering away and seeing its legs and everything. I knew that because it was starting to veer off away from us, it was quartering away. So I ended up putting it in the boiler, but it did not go through the rib cage. It actually ended up sticking into the
front leg
on
the opposite
shoulder.
side.
Yeah. And I felt, it all happened so fast, and I didn't actually see it hit, but I heard a big thunk, and it sounded like it went into a hollow tree that it was standing in front of. We got down there, and there's no blood. And I'm like, oh, great. And there was rain all day yesterday, and the ground is wet, and we're thinking, oh, this could be a long day.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden, I mentioned earlier, once you pull the trigger, it's work. That means your hunt is over. You filled your tag, and now it's working time.
Yep, it does.
And now the mindset changed over into that phase of the hunt.
Yep. absolutely. And people don't understand. I mean, it's a hunt in itself. Tracking and recovery is a hunt in itself. It's a mastery to
Yeah.
that as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be hunting all year long, whether it's e-scouting or
Hmm.
reloading or studying or listening to the ElkBros podcasts or whatever.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is this part after you hit that animal, so many people celebrate once they hit an animal. There's people that'll actually hoop and holler at that point, and it's so critical at that time to now become a great witness, man. To, you know, watch that animal where
Yep.
the last place is, what were the sounds, like you said, you heard the crack on it like that. How did it hump? How did it
Yeah.
move? What sounds did you hear when you went out? Marking that last location, listening for anything once it gets out of sight. Did it drop down to the left, to the right? Did you hear any of those sounds? And just really becoming observant of everything that could help you as far as your tracking goes now. So it's now your hunt changes to a different kind of hunt, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so it's interesting you mentioned that because now what happened is, we didn't start hooping and hollering. We just kind of sat there and listened,
Mm-hmm.
and you can hear it running down, straight downhill from us, and sticks and branches crashing everywhere, and pretty soon you start hearing that crashing sound going off to our left,
Okay.
and we're like, okay, pretty soon it stops, and you hear a little bit of kicking around, and you're like, all right, we got this thing in the bag, man. This is gonna be a piece of cake. He's just right down there. And so we're like, all right, let's pack up our stuff and go start tracking, whatever. And we get down there and there's no blood. And I'm like, well, where's my arrow? Looking around for about a half an hour, I can't find my arrow stuck in a tree because I thought I went through them and it went and stuck in a tree.
Uh-huh.
Well, I like, all right, let's go downhill a little bit more. And by this time, it's probably 35, 40 minutes after the shot. And we start tracking them a little bit. And I'd say we went with no blood. We went down just tracking his hoof because downhill pretty good. And, and an elk is a heavy animal. So every time he lands, he's just digging dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty easy that way. But there's a lot of other tracks that we saw, but we saw his fresh in the mud.
Right.
So we go down a little bit more, and all of a sudden it gets into the pines, and there's no more mud or dirt or anything, and there's no blood, and we start going off to the left, and we get on this little tiny game trail, and few tracks going through there, but we don't see his tracks, and we don't see any blood. And we're like, man, the sound came this way, and there's like this big alley, like an old road that's probably 50 years old, that's been probably used by many elk over and over and over again. And so it's hard to track anything that would be really brand new at that point anyway. Then it gets thicker, you get down there, and as you start going down, you realize it's leading into a draw that's pretty thick, and there's a lot of brush and willow and everything in there, and it just gets thicker and thicker.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of deadfall from a recent fire probably 5 years ago. And we didn't find him. Yeah, and all of a sudden it's an hour, and then an hour and a half, and then so we were like, all right, let's reset. Let's go back uphill. It's about a 200-yard climb going uphill, and let's reset. And we follow it again and again, and we just keep on going. And before you know it, it's about noon, 1 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when it starts setting in. You're like, okay, this is real. But we heard that elk fall and crash, and he's got to be here somewhere. And we saw a little speck of blood that was halfway down that hill from where we initially hit him. I think the first time you're just excited and you think, oh, he's just going to be right down here. We walk down there and
you
he's
go
going to
right
be
by
laying
it.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up finding that blood, and that was a saving grace. And he didn't bleed very much. There was only that one entrance wound, and so we ended up going a different direction. And then we started seeing the blood pour because he ended up hitting a couple of branches, and it knocked my arrow out of him. And then he started like
There you go.
brushing that bloody spot past a couple of leaves and then some pines and everything. And those blood marks were, man, they were over the height of my hip, so they were really high, but nothing on the ground. It was just wiping off of his side. And so we ended up tracking him on this little tiny, it must have been a little deer trail of some kind, and not very well used, actually. And we went around. So if you're sitting up from where we shot, the sound went off to the left. He was actually around a knob, like a peninsula in the terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And he went around to the right of that knob, down about 100 yards below that knob. And the sound, as he was traveling away to the right, the sound was echoing off the trees to our left and coming back to us. And so it gave it this image of him going off to the left, where in fact he went off to the right.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
it took us about a solid 2 or 3 hours, and finally we saw him, and then we were hooting and hollering.
Man, because if you've been hunting animals for any amount of time, first of all, that there's that elation that you put a great shot on the animal, and it's like, oh, we're going to find that critter just right down here, and then you don't, and then you're looking, and then it's hours later, and then it's just a speck of blood, and it's this peaks and valleys of emotion that are happening as you're doing this, man, and when you finally see that animal, dude, it's like tears time sometime, man. It's like such a relief, and happiness, and, I didn't lose it. I did find it, all of these emotions wrapped up into one,
And that's nothing to be embarrassed about. My old buddy, Mike Bright, on our very last hunt, he ended up getting a pretty nice deer, and he started bawling like a little baby.
Oh, absolutely, man.
He's a tough Marine.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Vietnam. He was a helicopter gunman, and probably one of the toughest guys I've ever met. And he's sitting there bawling like a baby up on the hill because he knows he didn't have too many times to do it. And it's hunting, man. It's all about it.
Well, and it's because you care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It means something to you, and the value of that animal and that animal's life means something to you as well. And the struggles that you go through, and the struggles you go through beating yourself up that, gosh, did I lose this? All of these things are going up and down through your head, and you just keep working it, like you guys said. You just rework it and not give up on it, and find it, man. So
for me, that's part of being successful too, is it doesn't for me, I've killed my fair share of animals, and I have a couple of good trophies in deer and elk, and that's enough. I don't have to get the same thing over and over, because that kind of actually gets a little boring. But when you enter a hunt with a certain mindset, and you achieve that, it doesn't have to mean like, oh, I'm going to kill a big old 6x6 bull this year. To me, that meant, I'm going to enjoy these last days with my old hunting buddy before he passes away, or I'm going to teach this new guy a new skill. And if he can do that new skill this season at least once, then I'm going to feel like I have success in that hunt, because I just helped a new hunter develop a new passion. Or, it could be anything. It could be something that if it could be an intangible. If I can help a new guy harvest his first animal, or if I can just get my first archery bull elk this year, even though he's a little 4x5 raghorn, then who cares? I had a great hunt.
But dude, I remember the picture. If I remember correctly, that bull that you had the coolest configuration on one side. It was
pretty neat.
One horn was out all by itself.
His left side,
one of his
was
antlers.
Yeah, he actually had a double beam on his left side.
Yeah, it was double on one side, right?
Yeah, he wasn't the largest guy, but he had a lot of character. It was really cool.
Very, very cool like that, man. And if I remember, and people are thinking, oh, you're looking for this animal. Why can't you see a big animal like this? But if I remember right, he was almost surrounded by a bunch of small jack pines.
Yeah, there was a lot of shrubbery, so
Yeah,
that's where he ended up going down into that draw. I was just telling you that, it got
yeah,
thicker and thicker, and he ended up running around the bottom side of that peninsula where it was thick. It has a lot of vegetation. It's a north face, so it holds its moisture, and there's a lot of growth in there. And it was tough, man. That's when, you're talking about transitioning from rifle to archery.
hmm,
With rifle, if you make a shot on an animal at a distance across the canyon, it's pretty easy to see a big elk running downhill
right,
as he's been shot,
yeah,
and you can trace him, and a lot of times you can see him fall and you know exactly where he's at.
right,
But in archery, in close quarters like that, it becomes a whole new game. So
absolutely.
you know you were asking me about that aha moment. It's like, man, after you experience that, then it's like, oh man, I feel like I'm like, oh, what's that lady, that expert tracker from back in the day. I
Oh, I
forget her
couldn't tell
name.
you, but
Yeah.
um,
Anyway, it made me feel really, really good after finding that bull. Like,
oh, I
man,
bet, man.
we just did it like the old school way. It's not like we're using technology out there at all.
Yep.
It's raw,
It's hands and
raw
knees, looking
hunting.
underneath leaves around. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah,
Trying to figure path of least resistance, all kinds of stuff, right? Yep.
yeah, and that's part of that transition that'll get a lot of guys of coming off rifle, and you go into that and you feel like a real archery or a real hunter out there doing it the right way, and there's something to be said about that.
So
It's not easy.
once you got there, where was your entrance on the animal? Was it higher? Was it mid body? Where did it go in at?
It was mid body, right in the crease behind the shoulder.
Okay, cool, man. Right in the crease behind
Yeah,
the shoulder, and it did pop on the other side, and yeah, and so
it hit the front shoulder, and it did that internal bleeding. I
right.
I think what happened is a lot of fat layers came out
Mhm.
through
Mhm.
the entrance wound and plugged that hole up, and then after that had wiggled loose in there a little bit, then some blood started kind of coming out, but
Right.
it wasn't gallons.
Yeah.
It was pretty tough.
Well, that's so crazy, man, that I was mentioning that type of scenario and you actually experienced it. So that's very cool, man. And and like I said, we're on our way to Canada. We get a text, I get a bunch of pictures, and people don't realize when I get stuff like that, I get so excited for people. In fact, I have the text here. It said, exclamation point, Joe, I sealed the deal on my first archery elk today. I was thinking how cool it was for Luis to draw first blood for your group, at the same time that you were doing this, man. So uh, that was very, very
Yeah,
cool to get that, man.
yeah. I remember Luis was up there and he
hmm
shot that one and got some camp meat for you guys.
Oh yeah, man. We were stoked when Luis did that. I mean, uh, we're, you know, it's so cool. We're so happy for each other when somebody makes that happen. In fact, I think we're happier
Yeah,
sometimes when we see somebody else make it happen like that. And
that's part of the teamwork. You help each other out, and then after you get yours, you
yep,
share your meat. I always try to offer. You say a little prayer over the animal. You offer your meat to anybody that's helping, and then you help out the next person, and hopefully they pay you in meat and high fives and the whole bit, and it just makes it worth it.
well, I want to tell you something, Scott. We're getting, this has been a blast, man. Like I said, this would be just a normal conversation for me talking with people most
Yeah.
of the time. But you also had sent in at one point a bunch of topics to discuss on some
Uh-huh.
things that you've come up with and issues and things to think about. And I tell you what I want to do is I'm actually going to invite you to come on the show and get beat up with me and the crew. Um,
Sweet.
yeah, I'm going to have you come on. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to kind of go through that group of topics that you sent and kind of
Okay.
give that a heading for what that's going to be about. And I want you to bring your thought processes. I want you to bring your viewpoints, those questions. You're actually going to have an opportunity at that point, instead of telling a story, but to ask some questions. We'll talk
Yeah, it'd
about
be great.
and look, the answers you're going to get are going to be our opinions. They're all of this stuff is about how each person might handle it. It doesn't mean it's the right way. It doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It's just how we would do it. And so from that, hopefully other people that have some of those same questions, because there were some big ones in there that I think we really want to discuss.
Yeah, they get, I just brainstorming and they get personal, because I feel like those things are on people's mind all the time.
Yep.
But a lot of the times people might be afraid to ask their hunting buddy or somebody else or whatever. It's too personal or whatever. So that'd be a fun discussion.
Yeah, no, and we're going to do that, man. And I will get back with you. Oh, and yes, you are a member of the 10% Club now, dude. So
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. And what size do you wear?
Oh, it depends on the week.
Oh, you're going to be one of those guys. You're not going to do a schmedium or something on me, right? I'm
going large.
Yeah, you're going large. Well, I have to see if I have one of those boogers here. We only have a couple of those shirts left. If I have one, I want to make sure I get a 10%er to you. If I don't have that, I'm going to make sure I get one of these other ElkBros shirts to you, to thank you for spending this time on a great conversation with a lot of tidbits that a lot of people will be associating to, man, and connecting with. And it's just been a super conversation. Glad to have had you on with me again. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I know I give you a phone call, and next thing you know, you're on the phone for over an hour, man. But
no worries. That's what I live for, man. I just, like I said, I like hunting with the old timers, and I like hunting with the new guys. And I hope that anybody listening to this feels like I've paid it forward. And I'm excited to learn more and more and more in the future. And this conversation can continue with that list that I sent you.
Yep. You guys that are listening out there, you got a chance to be at just a regular conversation between two people. We're just elk hunters just like you, man. And if you have a story that in any way that the ElkBros helped you out this year, where you were successful, you went out, you had this incredible hunt or had an incredible experience, send it in to me, man. Joe at ElkBros.com. I love reading them. Make sure you send some pictures. It might even end up a story. We sometimes put those pictures and stories together and put them on our website. But you might also be getting a phone call where we just have ourselves an Elk Camp conversation, y'all. So, Scott, I want to thank you. Everybody else out there, I just want to tell you, whatever you do, man, keep dreaming of the screaming, keep believing and achieving, but most of all, keep grinding. We'll see you next time. Scott, thank you, man.